The Empty Cup, a Zen reflection on the freedom of not knowing. There is an old story about a university professor who traveled a great distance to visit a Zen master, hoping to learn about meditation. He arrived at the master's small house at the edge of a forest and was invited inside for tea. The professor sat down and immediately began speaking, eager to share everything he already knew. He spoke of the books he had read on Buddhism, the lectures he had given on Eastern philosophy, the theories he had studied for over 20 years. The old master listened quietly and began to pour the tea. He poured the professor's cup full, and then, without pausing, kept pouring. The tea rose to the rim and then spilled over the edge, running across the table and onto the professor's clothes. The professor jumped up. "Stop! The cup is full! Can't you see it won't hold anymore?" The master set the teapot down calmly and looked at him. "Just like this cup," he said. "You are full of your own opinions, your own theories, your own certainty about what meditation is. How can I show you anything when there is no room left for it to enter?" The professor stood there in silence, tea dripping from his sleeve, and for the first time in a very long while, he had nothing to say. The story usually ends there, but in some versions, the professor stays. He sits back down, and this time, before speaking, he simply asks, "Then how do I empty my cup?" The master smiles and says nothing at first. He simply refills the teapot and pours a second cup, slowly, this time stopping exactly at the rim. "You already know how," the master finally says. "You knew the moment you stopped talking and started asking." This ache the story points to is one that follows many of us long after we've left school, long after we've become experts in whatever we do. We spend years filling our cup. We collect knowledge, opinions, certainties, a sense of who we are and how the world works. And this is not a mistake. A full cup, after all, is useful. It has taken us somewhere. It has kept us safe. It has made us capable. But somewhere along the way, many of us stop asking a simple question. Is there still room in this cup for anything new? We meet a new idea, and instead of tasting it, we measure it against what we already believe. We meet a person who sees the world differently, and instead of listening, we wait for our turn to explain why we're right. We meet a difficult moment in our own life, and instead of sitting with it openly, we reach immediately for an old explanation, an old story about ourselves, an old way of coping that may not even be true anymore. This is not a failure of intelligence. If anything, it often happens most to those of us who have learned the most, who have built entire identities around being the one who already knows. Let's pause here for a moment. Think gently of one belief you hold about yourself, something you consider simply true, without question. Perhaps it's, "I'm not a creative person." Perhaps it's, "I'm too old to start over." Perhaps it's, "This is just how I am, and I can't change." Notice how solid that belief feels, how much it feels like fact, rather than a cup you filled a long time ago, and perhaps never emptied since. Now take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, Simply ask yourself, quietly, is there still a little room in this cup, just enough for something new to enter? You don't have to answer yet. Just notice the question is even possible to ask. There is a second story, often told alongside this one, about a young swordsman who traveled to study under a famous master. On his first day, he asked eagerly, "Master, how long will it take me to master the sword?" The old master said, 10 years, perhaps." The young man, impatient, said, "But what if I train twice as hard as everyone else? What if I practice day and night?" The master considered this and said, "Then perhaps 30 years." The young man was stunned. "That makes no sense," he said. "If I work harder, shouldn't I learn faster?" The master replied, "A man in a hurry to arrive keeps one eye on the road ahead and one eye on the destination. He is always divided. But a man who walks without needing to arrive anywhere in particular watches the road completely with both eyes. He learns everything the road has to teach him, precisely because he is not trying to rush past it." The young swordsman did not understand this fully, not that day, but he stayed anyway, and slowly, over the years, he noticed something strange happening. The less he tried to prove how much he already knew, the faster his skills seemed to grow. The less he clung to his old habits, the more naturally his body learned new ones. It was not effort that had been missing. It was room, space, an emptiness where something new could actually land. This is often the part we misunderstand about growth. We assume that learning means adding more, stacking new information on top of old, building taller and taller towers of certainty. But real learning, the kind that actually changes us, often asks for the opposite. It asks us to first make room by setting something down. Think of how a hand already holding a stone cannot pick up a flower. It isn't that the hand is weak or incapable. It is simply full. The stone must be set down first, gently, not thrown away in anger, not judged as wrong to have carried, simply released so the hand is free again. Let's try something simple. Bring to mind one area of your life where you feel stuck, a relationship, a habit, a goal you keep circling without arriving anywhere. Now ask yourself, honestly, what old belief, what old story might still be filling that cup? Not to blame yourself for holding it, only to notice it's there. Perhaps it's the belief that you must have all the answers before you begin. Perhaps it's the belief that changing your mind means admitting failure. Perhaps it's simply the comfort of familiar suffering over the uncertainty of something new. Whatever it is, you don't need to solve it right now. You only need to see it clearly, the way the professor finally saw his own overflowing cup, dripping quietly onto the table in front of him. There is something deeply humble about admitting we don't know. In many cultures, and certainly in the noise of modern life, not knowing is treated as weakness. We are rewarded for having quick answers, strong opinions, confident conclusions. But the Zen tradition points to something different. It suggests that the most spacious, most creative, most alive state of mind is not the one that knows everything. It is the one still willing to be surprised. This is sometimes called beginner's mind. the mind of someone encountering something for the very first time, without the weight of expertise, without the need to already understand. A beginner asks questions freely, notices details an expert has long stopped seeing, remains curious rather than certain. You do not need to abandon everything you've learned to hold this kind of mind. The professor did not need to forget his 20 years of study. He only needed to set it down for a moment, long enough to receive something new, and then, if he wished, pick his knowledge back up again, perhaps reshaped by what he had just received. This is the invitation tonight. Not to empty your cup completely and become someone new, but simply to notice when it has become too full to hold anything else. To notice the places in your life where certainty has quietly replaced curiosity. To notice the relationships, the ideas, the parts of yourself you stopped exploring because you assumed you already understood them completely. Tomorrow, when you meet an old situation, an old person, an old version of a problem you've faced many times before, try pausing for just one breath before responding the way you always do. Ask yourself gently, what if my cup has room for something new here? Something I haven't noticed yet. Simply because I stopped looking, you may find, as the professor did, that the moment you stop pouring in your own explanations, something quieter has room to arrive. Not because you were wrong before, only because you were full. Like the old master pouring tea, life will keep offering you more experiences, more understanding, more of itself. The only question that remains is whether your cup still has room to receive it, or whether it is time, gently, without judgment, to set a little of it down